Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, the history of the game, and specifically let's talk about Dragon Magazine. What it stood for previously, what it stands for today, and what its lack of today means for the hobby. Alright, so let's just talk a little bit about Dragon Magazine. So Dragon Magazine, I think it started up in the 80s. And basically it was late 80s. I'm pretty sure it started in the 80s. And Dragon Magazine started coming out, and it was the official it was the official magazine of tabletop role-playing game. And it did have a relationship with TSR at different points. But to be clear, Dragon Magazine was, to this day, still stands as, bar none, the preeminent tabletop role-playing game magazine. Every single episode, to my knowledge, every single issue, to my knowledge, of the print Dragon Magazine contained content that was specific to Dungeons & Dragons, right? So it had content for Dungeons & Dragons. But also, every single issue celebrated content, concerned content, or was related to content in games that were not Dungeons & Dragons, right? So, and there were literally thousands of articles that were printed in Dragon Magazine, and Dragon Magazine really very much to this day holds a very precious, very special, very unique position in American history, okay? And that's really unique. It's really special, right? And it's really quite wonderful also. So, with all that said, I want to talk a little bit about Dragon Magazine. So, Dragon Magazine, for one thing, it had about 350 issues before it stopped printing. Okay. Now, let's talk about Dragon Plus. So, Dragon Magazine still, air quotes, exists, air quotes, today, and Wizards of the Coast owns the Dragon Magazine title, right? There is no print of Dragon Magazine today. There's absolutely zero printings of Dragon Magazine today, right? There are no print copies of it. It exists as an online magazine, and it is structured to look like a magazine, to have articles like the old magazine, but at the end of the day, it's really just another website location, and it really functions as a blog, right? So if you have a topic, you can call something on the web a magazine, but it's really a blog, and that's exactly what Dragon Magazine is today, right? So I want to talk about what was its purpose at the time. So at its time, it was a celebration of tabletop role-playing games, with Dungeons & Dragons being held as the preeminent game, right? That's what it functioned for the majority of its days, right? Now, one of the things I will say is Dragon Magazine definitely came out at different levels of quality throughout its history. It was very much taken very seriously, and it was incredibly important for the hobby, because you could find Dragon Magazine on the shelves of Barnes & Nobles, on the shelves of Borders books, on the shelves of Walden's books. You could find Dragon Magazine at some hip gas stations, right? It was a magazine, and it was distributed, and it came out monthly. And while magazines were a thing, Dragon Magazine was saying that, tabletop role-playing games are a serious industry, and there are hundreds, if not there are thousands of people that take this hobby incredibly serious, take playing, being a better player, being a better dungeon master, a better game master, very, very seriously. So that was the stated goal, was just the celebration of tabletop role-playing game. And in my opinion, Dragon Magazine really did achieve that. It accomplished that goal, right? It really was a great celebration of Dungeons & Dragons, right? So what did it become after that? What did it become after it was, what's the best way to put this? What purpose did it serve after it was beyond its stated goals, right? Well, one of the biggest purposes was it gave legitimacy to designers. right? So one of the things is you could work very hard, you could go to the right conventions, you could get connected to TSR, you could get connected to Wizards of the Coast, you could connect it to Hasbro, right? And then you could find yourself an official published writer within Dragon Magazine. And there was a cachet that went with that, right? There was a very distinct cachet that went with that. It was saying, because there were literally thousands of people who wanted to write for Dragon Magazine. And you could write, you could create new heritages, you could create new classes, you could create new magic items, you could do pieces on, you could do tabletop role-playing game philosophy. You could say, hey, this is my theories on being a good game master. This is my theory on how dice should be cared for. This is my theory on how the industry should progress, right? And when you did that, everybody could get access to their own blogs. Everybody could create their own zines. But Dragon Magazine was the pinnacle, right? And it really served as, this is, if you're going to put your big girl pants on and step up to the real writer's table, this is where it happens, right? And that's what it was. It was really like, you've made it within the sphere of Dungeons & Dragons history, within the sphere of game designer legitimacy, and it gave a cachet to your writing skills and your position specifically within the overall hobby, right? It was very, very important what it actually accomplished, right? Now let's talk a little bit about the history. So it started in the early 80s. It went through the 80s and the 90s. In 1997, Dungeons & Dragons was purchased by Wizards of the Coast. It was only held by Wizards of the Coast, and before that, it was owned by TSR. So Dragon Magazine was published by TSR. Then Dungeons & Dragons was sold to Wizards of the Coast in 1997. At that point, and Dragon Magazine went along. So TSR owned Dragon Magazine, and then that passed to specifically to Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast only held Dungeons & Dragons for 2 years. Before they sold it to Hasbro. And Hasbro owns Dungeons & Dragons to this day. They also own Dragon Magazine. So Dragon Magazine has had 3 owners, right? And during that period of time, there was definitely different levels of quality for the magazine during that time. And I will say, it absolutely got worse toward its end, right? Now, to tell the truth, there was a brief period in the early 2000s where Paizo picked up the mantle of publishing Dungeons & Dragons and took this task that was an extra task off of Hasbro's shoulders, right? Hasbro was barely making it to get everything together enough to have a Dungeons & Dragons game and to make that Dungeons & Dragons game go forward, right? And they really didn't have the bandwidth to be creating a good Dragon Magazine on each month. There are people who care deeply about this magazine, right? So they passed that over to Paizo. They allowed Paizo to do all the publishing and the printing of Dragon Magazine, but it was still owned by Hasbro, right? And Paizo got so much experience creating a solid Dragon Magazine that's what allowed them to kind of alley-oop right into creating Pathfinder. And Pathfinder is now still a viable game today. Although in my opinion, I think Pathfinder will always be an also-ran, right? And Pathfinder is just an alternative to Dungeons & Dragons. And the days where there was a brief period in 4th edition's history where Pathfinder did surpass Dungeons & Dragons in sales, but those days are long gone. And at this point, Pathfinder is just really kind of a footnote, and they're just one of many, many, many companies that create fantasy tabletop role-playing games. And they really have a hard time discerning themselves today. But we should understand, Pathfinder exists because of Dragon Magazine. Okay, all right. So you have all of that history for Dragon Magazine. Dragon Magazine accomplished a ton. It was really special. So what is Dragon Magazine today? What should it be? And what does the lack of Dragon Magazine today really mean? So by the way, I think there is a lack of Dragon Magazine. I do read through the Dragon Plus, but it's just a blog. It's not a print magazine, okay? All right, so let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about what Dragon Magazine should really, what the lack of it means today. So it is deeply missed. I think it is really a travesty that Dragon Magazine is not printed today. I think it should be printed. And because we don't have it, we have lost that cachet of these are the real ballers, right? Like, these are the real deal writers who have really struggled and gone through the crucible of that burning fire to say, I am not the chaff, I am the wheat, right? And so without that, we have a lot of chaff. And today, it is incredibly difficult to tell the chaff from the wheat. And frankly, like, you can't spin around and throw a rock on a rock made of foam rubber on Twitter without hitting somebody who's publishing their own game, right? It's just, there's so many games, so many worlds, so many systems, and the reality is it is very, very hard today to tell the chaff from the wheat, because everybody's just spinning up, and there's just a lot of chaff, very little wheat, and it's getting harder and harder to discern. And that's one of the things that Dragon Magazine did, is it helped us to tell the wheat from the chaff, right? So I think overall, we really are suffering from a lack of Dragon Magazine. So what would I do if I was Hasbro, right? One, I would begin printing Dragon Magazine immediately at a cover price of $20 an issue. $20 an issue. And I would make only 1,000 print copies of Dragon Magazine, okay? And then I would just preserve that going forward. And the way you would do this is you would make sure that you could create every single Dragon Magazine on $10,000 plus, on $10,000, on a budget of $10,000. And that would include printing and all the writing, right? Now, I know, I can hear you already. You're like, well, Scott, you can't pay those writers. Well, guess what? You really don't need to pay writers for, to write in Dragon Magazine. Absolutely no one who ever wrote for Dragon Magazine ever did it because they needed the money, right? You can correct me if I'm wrong, but if anybody was out there like, ooh, I'm really scraping to feed my family with Dragon Magazine article money, that did not happen. Like, and please, I invite your correction in the comments below, and I will have that conversation with you. Like, that person was making poor life choices if they were choosing to feed their family with Dragon Magazine article money. There's a lot better ways to feed yourself or anyone else. It was always done, in my opinion, for, like, and honestly, if there was anybody who's like, I'm here for the money, like, you can kick them to the curb, because there's going to be a line of 200 writers who will gladly write for a penny a word for Dragon Magazine, right? And the reason why is that magazine truly, it's a joke nowadays, but, like, I've seen actually people wearing this shirt paid in exposure, but the reality is, you really did, like, the cachet of being a Dragon Magazine writer was worth far more than whatever pittance they were getting paid, right? So, and that's the reality is here, is like, you could pay very, very small amounts, and I would pay the writers darn near dirt on this, right? And the reason why is, you want to, you feel that you should be paid more to write for Dragon Magazine. Well, you're fully capable of having that opinion. Step back, and there's about 200 people in line who will write this for a penny a word, right? Like, it's just, come on, like, so that's just my opinion. And the reality is, I think there are hundreds of writers who would write for a reprinted Dungeons & Dragon Magazine. But I don't even need to wonder this. I know this right now. There are dozens of sites right now that have writers writing weekly and monthly articles for their sites for nothing. For nothing. Guaranteed. Like, there's dozens of these sites, right? And they have no shortage of people to write these articles, right? And the reality is, and the reason why is, again, there's a cachet to it, right? And Dragon Magazine is the ultimate cachet. So I really, really feel like, they really should, print 1,000 copies. It should be $20 a copy, right? So, and at $20 for 1,000, that's a budget of $20,000, right? That's it. That's all you're going to get. So each one's got to cost $10,000 to print and distribute, right? And that is not going to be easy, right? But the reality is, it can be short, it can be brief. It could be a chap book, right? But the reality is I really feel it should go back into print. And the reason why is there's a market for it. So one, there's more than enough. Come on. Dungeons & Dragons has an incredibly... Everybody who plays Dungeons & Dragons is creative, artistic, and intelligent. And frankly, there's not many of them that don't make a considerable amount of money. And the idea that there wouldn't be 1,000 people who play Dungeons & Dragons right now who would be willing to put out $20 a month, right? There's more than enough, right? So it is my opinion that it should definitely begin being printed again. And the reason why, and when it's reprinted, it should not start at number 1. It should start right up at the current month, right? So it'd probably be like Dragon Magazine number 403, right? Start it up right with where it is now with the print version, right? And the reason why you can do this is there's already a precedence for this. DC and Marvel have done this. They have stopped books at like number 607, started at number 1, done 37 issues of pure junk, and then restarted the title at a higher number and said, these numbers, these count for it, which is pure utter nonsense. If you think I'm wrong, check out DC 52. It's really because they restarted every book at number 1, but now you will find Detective Comics at issue 1063. So it's definitely a thing. But I really think we should go back to printing Dungeons & Dragons. We should find a path to print it. And the reason why is, the biggest reason is to get that cachet back, right? To get back a very important divider, right? Like that says, hey, all these people, these are your blog writers, right? But these guys here, these people here, these are the people who have, kind of lifted themselves up to the top of the publishing heap and been refined through fire. These are the people that really care about Dungeons & Dragons and about tabletop role-playing games. I think there'd be a lot of value to relaunching Dragon Magazine. That's my opinion. What do you think? I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.